What's going on, everybody? This is Brent0331. Appreciate you guys tuning in. So we're going to do another live stream over current events. Got a small panel tonight. Got our typical Les Pegasus Test. That's his YouTube channel. Be sure to check him out. Pegasus Test was a Marine in the early 90s, veteran of the Gulf War, has his own tactical training company and a logistics company. Always brings a wealth of knowledge to the group. So Les, thanks for jumping on tonight.
Glad to be here, Brent.
All right, and then we got Logan. You guys don't know him. He served in the United States Army. He was a staff sergeant, right? Right, yep. Staff sergeant, intel, veteran of Iraq and Afghanistan. Brings an awesome, excellent contribution to the channel, and he's going to do our intel update for us tonight. So, Logan, thanks for jumping on.
Thanks for having me on, brother.
All right, we got T-Thrill 8762. That's your YouTube channel, right? All right, you guys can check him out. But he is a instructor at the you're Bravo Company Commander now, buddy, right? All right, you're big dog. Will's been on the stream a couple times, and he was a Marine in the early 2000s. And thanks for jumping on tonight, brother.
Thanks for having me again, Brent.
All right, guys. So that is our panel tonight so far anyways. I'm going to throw it over to Logan. He's going to give us a brief on what's going on in Ukraine and any other intel stuff around the world. I don't care. If you got some tidbits for communist China, that's fine with me too. So I'm going to turn it over to you, brother. You got the con.
Thanks, brother. First thing I'm going to bring up is, let's see here. Can you hear me?
Yeah, we got you.
Cool. All right. Yes, I just wanted to show this picture of Anthony Blinken, the Secretary of State of the United States, on his travels around the Middle East. And he is now in Turkey, I believe, waiting on the tarmac for Erdogan and his press corps. And he's been snubbed about 7 times now in the past week. And if you look at his face, you can tell that he is having a rough time. The last place he was in Oman. He met with the foreign secretaries of state for all the Arab countries, who they also snubbed him and yelled at him and told him that they wanted a ceasefire. He is yet to produce anything of value as far as any agreements from Netanyahu or the Israelis. And really, this has been an embarrassment and very pathetic for our diplomatic corps. Let's see here. And if I can zoom in on this a little bit more, you can see Gaza. And I like to use this map because if you can read a military map, you can always tell the places in gray are very high density urban areas. And the ones in red are also urban areas, but they have been marked out as not as dense as these gray areas. As you can see the axis of attack from the Israeli, the IDF forces that have been built up around Gaza, coming in from the sea at first, then from the northeast. And then the main effort is actually coming in from the east this way along Wadi Gaza. This actual line here demarcates the line that the Palestinians were given to remove themselves to the southern part of Gaza. However, as you can see in this area where the main effort is pushing, there's little to no urban centers, maybe some small villages. From what I've seen in the pictures, really it's been the same tactics they used in Lebanon in 2006. They take some bulldozers, they create these dirt roads through the rural communities, not along roads. And then they follow closely behind these bulldozers and drive their tanks up and basically push into contact. As you see, this is a movement to contact. They're going to secure this all the way to the sea. They have attested that they've made it all the way to this point and seized this line of control, separating the north and south, basically cutting Gaza into two. Now, as you look down here, there's more urban centers that haven't even been touched, and most of these are going to be well supplied from the tunnels coming from Egypt. As far as Gaza City, this is going to be the main objective of the IDF push into Gaza. And if you look at any of the maps they have online, any think tank, studies group, anything tracking live maps, you're going to see that they haven't even touched any of the urban areas in the north. And from what I've seen in the past 3 days, they've lost 12 Merkavas and probably twice as many APCs. And they haven't even made it into any of the urban areas. So the real litmus test right now is going to be what it looks like when they actually enter Gaza City and the casualties that they'll take. The numbers on Palestinian casualties has been limited as far as just civilian numbers, but it's a significant amount of civilian casualties caused by indiscriminate bombing and targeting by tank fire and other artillery. Going to Ukraine, as we talked about the last live we did, hasn't been really any changes at all. The Russians have tried to push west into Kupiansk along the Oskil River here. They have not even gotten close to the city. They have encountered these green zones, as you can see, north of the city and along the river here. And as soon as they hit those green zones, they're stopped dead in their tracks. Here's the southern front, Zaporizhia. You see that there's not been much movement here either. Robotny is still there. Verbove has not been taken. It's a stagnant, muddy mess down there. The only significant news that came out of the past week was an attack by Russian ballistic missile forces on a basically what it was a promotion ceremony of the 128th Field Artillery Regiment of the Ukrainian Army. We're holding a promotion ceremony, an award ceremony, and this was put out by the commander on Twitter. Now, Russians quickly found this information and used tactical weapons to attack this promotion ceremony. I think it killed 22 officers of the field artillery. Let's see. I think that's it. No movement on the Avdiivka front. They've made supposedly 3 kilometers, but as far as their gains made from the Avdiivka area salients surrounding the northern and southern parts of the city, they've been pushed back just as much as they gained. So significant Russian casualties. UAF is considering pulling out the headquarters out of Avdiivka, but no word on if that's actually happened or not.
Oh, excellent intel brief, man. I appreciate that.
Yep.
So just going back to the Israeli strategy, it looks like they're cutting Gaza in two and kind of creating like a hammer and anvil. So, I mean, I would assume most of the fighters are up north and they're trapped in that pocket right there. And then, you know, I guess the IDF's just going to push down and eliminate them one by one.
Yeah, they could try. I mean, they've taken significant losses of vehicles doing their little bulldozing trip. But, I mean, the Merkava is supposed to be like the premier urban fighting tank. And so far, the Palestinians have been able to circumvent all the reactive armor, the trophy systems by using drones. And then they have like a homemade I can only describe it as a homemade RPG-29 with a composite head on it. They've homespun it in a lathe, and basically it's to take out their reactive armor, and it's just as effective as a regular Soviet one.
There's a lot. I don't know if you guys have seen this, but there's a lot of videos out there of them engaging IDF armor. And they're definitely scoring hits. So there was even one where the guy ran up and threw like a shape charge ran up to it personally and threw a shape charge on it. And, you know, you can't help but notice, and I'm not trying to be a backseat quarterback here, but like in these videos, you see every single one of them, like there's a lack of dismount infantry nearby. And, you know, it blows my mind because we saw this a lot when the Russians first invaded Ukraine. Like it seemed like there was a lack of dismounted infantry. And it's like, this is fucking World War II shit. Now, I'm not saying that IDF's not using dismounted infantry. It just seems like in these videos where the, Hamas guys are successful, at least according to their video, like you just don't see dismounts protecting those tanks from, those infantry attacks.
Yeah, it's a good example. You see them completely buttoned up. And if I was an IDF tanker, I'd want to be buttoned up too. But at the same time, what we talked about last time, how they're mechanized infantry and tank forces are completely separate branches, like separate arms. There's no combined arms training. There's no combined arms integration. At the very beginning, I did see dismounted infantry behind berms, following closely behind the Merkavas. But as soon as those infantry take fire, what do not very well disciplined infantry do when they take fire? They hold cover, and the armor advances, and then the armor is destroyed. If they had competent leadership in these pushes, they would be making sure that their tank forces were not outrunning and outpacing their infantry.
Yeah, it definitely shows a clear lack of training in a combined arms environment. And it's just sad because this is exactly what happened 50 years ago during the Yom Kippur War. The first week of that, the Israeli armor was absolutely decimated without its infantry support. And they learned the lesson a lot quicker back then than they seem to be now.
I saw a statement by one of their Defense Department heads, and he was saying how they have 267 tanks on the Gaza line, and they can afford the loss of 12. But if you think about it, like, they haven't even gone into any built-up areas yet. And I mean, it's been proven that the Palestinians are already using tactics that have been perfected in the Chechen War, such as hugging the forces. You see how close these engagements are with their RPG attacks and their small arms. They're like right on top of the Israelis. They're hugging them. They're making sure that they can't be targeted by their artillery, and they are sneaking around. And they're coming up behind the Israelis already. And we were somebody mentioned this in the last video that we did, but I mean, when they have tunnels and stuff like that, I mean, these Israelis can go, line of battle. They can come in columns of tanks. They can try to establish a battle line behind cover. They can take, strongholds within the city, maybe like take a tall building or something like that. But if the Palestinians can go in a tunnel and come behind them, it's going to be a problem.
Hopefully that
Well,
they're,
cities eat people.
Go ahead, Les.
I was just going to say, cities eat people. It's the old tactical problem. We saw it in Fallujah. You saw it in Way City. You saw it in Stalingrad. And looks like the Israelis it's their turn to learn the lesson.
Yeah, mountain warfare is a totally different beast, and I know they've had success in their past engagements with their tank battles and kicking ass and all. Sometimes it looks like they're using that past success and just not remembering or not watching what's been going on elsewhere. Again, with your armor and not having your infantry, like Logan was saying, you guys can advance all you want, but if you're not staying up with them and clearing ahead or those tunnels behind them, they can just pop up and just knock them out easy peasy.
The Israelis, a lot of these people are saying they're unstoppable in tank combat, and they've had such great success. Yes, just like Douglas McGregor had great success in the battles in the Gulf War, he was in, the perfect tank terrain, flat desert with no obstacles, nothing. And of course, you're going to be successful if you're a tank heavy force and you're fighting dismounted Egyptians and jeeps, But when you come into an urban combat situation and there's other obstacles in your way and civilians on the battlefield, it's going to be a completely different scenario.
And the enemy is paying attention. They know how you were successful, that those other battles, and a good enemy is going to change their tactics to try to defeat that. And it looks like they are.
I want to point out that, you will see people say that tanks are not effective in urban combat, and I 100% disagree. Having been in urban fighting with armor assets involved, they gave me a warm and fuzzy fight. One of my fondest memories is in the Najaf cemetery. There was a road going right through it, and there was an M1 Abrams, and on the other side of this wall, an RPG flew over the wall, and then I kind of in the corner of my eye, I looked over, and all of a sudden the wall starts collapsing. It was an M1 Abrams that had backed up into the wall to avoid taking a hit. And they were hooking and jabbing right there with us. And but we were doing it right. We were dismounted infantry on each side of that tank, and they were right there, providing that firepower with 50 cals, coaxial machine guns, and their main gun. And it was just a fucking beast. So, I mean, I wouldn't want to go into an urban fight without a tank, to be quite frank.
It's true, and I mean, even like people are saying how like the Russian Terminator and the T-90s and all these like are the ultimate tanks for urban combat. Really, all you need is like a T-72 even is a great tank to have like on the outskirts of a city. I've seen Abrams clear whole alleyways and like skip rounds around corners and stuff like that, and just like totally jack the Iraqis up. But at the same time, they have to, they're training out in the open desert. They haven't trained for urban combat like this, and they're gonna have to learn some really difficult lessons if they're even going to go. I have a feeling that once they get to the point of surrounding Gaza, that they're going to be very hesitant to go in. That's just my opinion.
Well, you brought up an excellent point last stream that we talked about this Israeli conflict, and that was that the vast majority of the IDF are conscripts, they're reservists. It's not something they do on a day-to-day basis, and literally between, if you look at when they were mobilized to now, there hasn't been much time elapsed, right, to mobilize your dudes, get them equipped and armed, and get all their gear passed out, and then start doing rehearsals and going over, plans and everything else. Like the timeline, even though it seemed like it took a long time for Israel to push in, like they had to stand up their forces, prepare them, and then conduct rehearsals and develop their battle plan. All that, in the amount of time that it took before they crossed that LOD, like it has not been that very long. So, that's going to come at a price for sure. And that urban fighting right there is as bad as it can be. You got tunnels below and fucking destroyed buildings above. It's like Stalingrad, 2.0.
Yeah, and bringing up the Stalingrad example, I mean, the Luftwaffe made a huge mistake in that battle, like flattening the city, because really that prevented the German armored forces and their self-propelled artillery and their storm artillery from moving into the city and actually being used. So the more that they destroy the city with their air attacks, they're going to have problems using any APCs to get in. We saw this like in the Syrian Arab Army was a good example of this when they destroyed some of the cities in Syria. They had a hard time at first getting those Soviet tanks and those BMPs and stuff inside the city, because that's ultimately what the tactics they were using was using close mechanized infantry support and tanks and just blasting the shit out of everything.
What you got, Les, man? I know you're a big Markova fan.
I am a big fan of that tank, for sure. Mainly because I think it would fit in the Marine Corps real well if we still had tanks. That being said, it's not being used correctly. Any tank without infantry support is just a mobile target. And like we've said here already, they're proving that. Cities eat equipment, cities eat men. The Israelis don't have that many. And I'm sure part of the reason Hezbollah is holding off doing anything to the north is they're waiting for Israel to get sucked into that big people-eating monster called Gaza City, where they won't be able to pull out because they'll be stuck in the fight.
Yeah, it's also important to note that it's just a tough fucking fight, I mean, last casualty report I saw the other day was like 20 something IDF. I mean, I'm surprised it's that low, to be quite frank, considering what they're up against. I think it's going to shoot drastically up, and you think about tough battles like Iwo Jima. We lost more Marines than Japanese that were killed on Iwo Jima, but we still came out on top. So I wouldn't be surprised if in the end, IDF lose a lot more troops than actual Hamas fighters. I mean, they're the ones that are on the offense. So
I think it's also important that, the civilians on the battlefield portion, I think, is probably the most significant historical issue here. It's not like other places in the world where things can be hidden and, there's no press or anything that can be watching what's going on. I mean, you're actively seeing whole families being, wiped out. You're seeing infrastructure that's shouldn't be targeted under the rules of war, totally destroyed. even if there was bunkers or something under it, it can't be attacked. And the world opinion is turning against Israel significantly already. Can you imagine once they go into the city and then you see more civilians? It's probably going to be the most civilian dense battle that we've seen since probably what? The third battle of Kharkiv or something. It's going to be ridiculous. And I think that the civilian casualties are going to force other countries to act. You see the Yemenis have declared war. You see the Tunisians have declared open war on the Israelis. And while many countries might not declare war on Israel, they will certainly act against them with their intelligence services and economically.
Oh yeah, that goes for sure. I'm not sure what effect that'll have on Israel with Uncle Sugar propping her up. But to go back to the previous thing about the lack of casualties, I think a lot of that is due to the Merkava itself. The whole design principle behind that tank is crew protection, where they sacrifice a lot of mobility and in the earlier marks of it, even firepower over crew protection. And in that video that's out there where the Hamas guy runs up and I think he puts like an RG5 grenade on the back of it, that thing probably blew up and didn't do any damage inside except for unless it caused some spalling. The design of that tank has probably got a lot to do with why the casualty count's so low. While they might be losing tanks, they're not losing the crews, which is their most valuable asset. And that's one of the design parameters because the turret on the Merkava is way in the back because up front, not only have heavily sloping armor, that's also where the engine compartment is, and it's designed to take hits so that stuff coming through the front glacis goes into the engine and not into the crew compartment. And it has a great big door on the back for a tank anyways, great big door for getting the crew out and for another Merkava to have enough room to put that crew inside of it. So that's probably contributing to the low casualty count right now.
Yeah, as far as I can see, they're doing the same thing the Ukrainians are doing. They're trading vehicles for crew and hoping that they can keep up the amount of armor production, but it doesn't look like it's going to be the same situation.
Yeah, I also believe, I could be wrong here, but the Israelis have not been big in casting off the older marks of Merkava or even their M60s and Centurions. From what I understand, they still have them in deep storage. I could be wrong about that. So they have more armored vehicles.
There's a lot of M113s rolling around too, I've seen.
Because it's an awesome vehicle. That's why.
I agree. That's a great little vehicle, man.
It's a lot better than what replaced it in many respects.
There was something else I wanted to bring up as far as U.S. support to Israel and how it's shaped in the past couple of weeks. At first, they got a blank check, and everybody was not surprised by that. But in the past week or so, past couple of weeks, we've seen the activist part of the Democratic Party take massive steps to pull funding from political campaigns, use various other tactics, and in general degrade the support of Israel and the Democratic Party. If you look at like guys like Blinken and people in the administration, they're almost what you call like neoliberal cons. They're pretty much the same as neocons. They have the same geopolitical views, geopolitical goals, and they seem to be on the track to wanting to escalate the conflict. Part of the assessment that I was writing for this week was the Gulf of Tonkin, and I'm sure you guys are familiar with that. How do U.S. wars always start? And how is the U.S. Navy involved in those starts? And the amount of ships that are arriving in such a small naval space is, I was looking at today, the order battle for the naval forces in Iraq for the invasion, and it was 5 small amphibious and carrier fleets. Now we have 4 large, the 4 largest carrier groups in the naval forces, probably a third of our naval surface fleet, engaged in this it's not an invasion or anything. It's just a show of force. And it almost seems like they're waiting for somebody to shoot a rocket or missile at them. And they're placing themselves in that position for a reason. And I think that we can see a situation where, like Gulf and Tonkin situation, where true or not, one of our carriers could be targeted with a silkworm or something, and we could find ourselves in an escalatory conflict with Iran or another force.
Possible, but this type of naval response is what we've always done. If you look back in the history books, every time it flares up over there, we send in a carrier battle group, we send in an amphibious ready group. And to be honest, the modern groups, due to the very sad state of our fleet, are much smaller than what we've sent in the past.
I mean, I think they're out there initially using it as a deterrent just to keep other dudes from jumping in. But Logan, I wouldn't be surprised, if something like that, was to happen, which we would hope not, because it's funny. Who really knows what side we would pick right now? Who we're going to back based on the rhetoric and everything you hear out in today's political sphere.
Yeah, you are right about the deterrent of keeping other people out. That's spot on, Will. At sea, the Israeli Navy doesn't have the great record its land forces do or its air force does. So, yeah, having our fleet over there is probably keeping a few other people in check, because if you look at the naval order of battle and you look at what Egypt has, that's a hell of a fleet they've built up. If you look what the Turks have, that's a hell of a fleet they've built up. So we probably are keeping some people in check.
Well, as far as yesterday, the Turks have cut off all diplomatic relations with Israel. There's no more diplomats in either country from either Turkey or Israel. And the rhetoric is pretty high with Erdogan. He's that old watermelon salesman. He's talking a lot of shit.
The big thing is, I mean, if the roles were reversed and that kind of attack happened here, I mean, what would we do? I mean, in the beginning, like you said, there was a lot of people that were like, hey, they were attacked. They had a bunch of people, going over the walls through the wire, killing a bunch of civilians and all. And now they want their pound of flesh of their retribution. But I mean, the big thing is when you look at the whole thing, who's right? Who's to say what is enough? What is that strategic, or I forget the word, where, hey, we're going to hit you, proportional, or that proportional response, or, if they've had enough and it's time they're going to try to wipe everybody out. And like you said, I think like Brent had said earlier, with the casualties being low, they're waiting for them to come in. They're not going to try to kill as many civilians, which then the enemy has the upper hand anyway. So that's where the body counts and all go up.
I mean, when you speak to when does it end, or what's the correct end state of this conflict, I think you can look at what a Israeli politician stated yesterday. He said that nothing is off the table as far as like complete genocide of the Palestinian people. He said that the presence of them in the Gaza Strip was basically there's no end until there's nothing left. He said that if it was up to him, he'd use nuclear weapons against Gaza and just finish it that way. And there was calls for him to resign, and then Netanyahu secretly went behind and canceled his resignation vote or something like that. And you can see that on the Israeli side, there's nobody telling them to hold back. And that could be a major issue because, as you know, like the Yom Kippur War, they've been using nuclear blackmail since the 70s against the United States. Now, do people in the United States support Israel? Maybe the evangelicals and a small, group of people. But in general, people would drop Israel tomorrow because a lot of what's going on there is not in the U.S. interest. It's actually against our interests. And the intelligence community has echoed this several times, especially in meetings with Congress. And former members of the intelligence community have said that continued support of Israel with a blank check is to the detriment of U.S. Interests in the global community. And you can see that our status in the global community right now, the UN, other countries, is shit. Our State Department is getting stood up by small little third world countries. This would never happen. This is probably the first time I've ever seen something like that happen. I couldn't imagine this happening to the United States before, but it shows that our reputation is wholly degraded. And the continued support of this conflict, and especially the voices that are saying to genocide Palestinians, is going to do nothing but escalate the conflict. And of course, that's not, to U.S. interests. If you look at the recruitment numbers, are very, very low, with the exception of the Marine Corps. I think the Marine Corps met their recruitment goals this year, but the Army barely made 60 or 70% of the recruitment goals, maybe, for the fiscal year. And who's going to join during a conflict except for hardcore dudes? I don't know. What's your opinion?
Again, you said you're listening to your points a lot, where they were saying that the politician over in Israel, that's the same thing though that the other side has been saying the same thing about genocide, and they want all the Israelis dead. So again, we're still back. I mean, this thing has been going on for a long time, and Thrill doesn't have the dang on the answer, because if I did, I wouldn't have the job I had now. It's just, it's a shit show, and I wish somebody would be able to snap a finger and everybody would calm it down. But it gets to the point where if both sides are saying they're going to annihilate, who are we supposed to side with, or who's the good guy, who's the bad guy? Because ultimately, that's what the regular people from the outside looking in want to say. Hey, who's the good guy? Who's the bad guy? Make them feel better on who they're backing. And right now, it's just real damn. It's a murky area.
Yeah, I mean, there's no good guy, bad guys in the situation to me. This is two forces that are held back by leadership of the United States and other countries in the region. The UN has come out, the other European councils and everybody else has come out and say we need to have a humanitarian pause in the conflict. The whole reason for Blinken's trip to Oman to meet the Arab heads of their state departments, foreign affairs or whatever, was to broach the idea of having a U.S. and French-led peacekeeping force installed in Gaza after the main conflict was over. And of course, the Arabs laughed at him. And the whole purpose of the meeting was supposed to be about having a ceasefire. And like I said previously, this has been like a tour of pathetic shame for Blinken. He started out in Israel, saying, hey, can we have a humanitarian pause? And Netanyahu was like, no, we're going to kill everybody. And then he went to Saudi Arabia, Qatar, Oman, like all these other Arab countries, to try to, I guess, he had nothing in his hand. He came with nothing. He didn't have any agreements from the Israelis. He arrived in Iraq yesterday to speak to the Prime Minister of Iraq, and he said it wasn't about the Israeli conflict, but the attacks on the U.S. troops in Iraq at our LSAs are a direct result of our intervention. And I mean, it is an intervention because the Israelis hold us by the balls with their Samson option. And like before, they've threatened to cause escalatory conflict in the region and the world unless we help them. And this is another thing that JFK and other people had a problem with. And you can see what happened to them.
All good points.
Yeah, I'm curious, Logan, how you would have gone about it. Let's say you were Prime Minister of Israel and the attacks that took place with Hamas terrorists coming over the border and doing that to your people. What would your response be?
I think my response would be very similar. However, I have to go with a historically sound process from when I was a young man. And when the towers were attacked by the Saudi Arabian terrorists and other intelligence services from somewhere. We were mad and we wanted to do something. However, what was the first step that George W. went and did? He went to the global community and said, here's what happened to us. We need to do something. America's going to take care of business. And of course, during that whole process, we were activating our soft guys, our third option guys, and sending them in to prepare the ground, and we were, speeding up our 82nd, 101st, all those dudes. But you have to go through the process of this, democratic global system. You can't just say, well, fuck these people, I'm going to go in and fucking wipe them out. You have to go to the UN, which was created by, people that wanted this kind of thing not to happen. We have two small countries literally trying to kill each other. It takes a leadership of another larger country, a stronger country, to make sure that these people don't fight each other and that negotiations start at some point. Right now, the Chinese and the Russians and some of our other Axis opponents have taken the lead on this. They've gone to the UN Security Council and offered draft proposals to the Security Council and to the UN at large for peace or for a ceasefire. And of course, these are vetoed by Israeli lobbyist groups within the United States. And then, of course, they were vetoed by our own government. So as far as like the game, the diplomatic game in the UN and other global organizations, we are losing, and we're losing face. What would my response be? A strategic response, just like is happening now. But, you have to go through the process. You have to bring the world to your side. You have to bring in a coalition of the willing. You have to bring in Japan, bring PlayStations. There's got to be a group of everybody coming together and saying, yes, it's okay. Or at least a portion of the global populace that say, we understand you did the right thing by going through the process and you still killed them. I think that's the difference.
I think the big difference though between like what happened to us on 9/11 and what happened to the Israelis is like there's not 200 something Americans being held hostage in Afghanistan, right, following 9/11. So it's like their people are being held hostage right now. Like what would, like, if I was fucking king of America and 200 of my people were being held hostage, from another country that borders us, like I ain't waiting, man. And I will say at least the Israelis, from what I understand, gave notice to the people of Gaza, like, hey, if you're in the north, your ass better go south because we're coming. So, I mean, at that point, they gave him a deadline. What was it, like a week? somebody correct me if I'm wrong. Like, if you're a civilian, get the fuck out of here. And we did the same thing for Fallujah, right?
Yes, but they had in Fallujah they had somewhere to go. We set up stations to debrief these people. Like not everybody, but we tried to streamline the people just like we did in Mosul and it was 2010, 2012 with ISIS. I mean, we filtered the people out to gain intelligence. We did other stuff. There's nowhere for these people to go. They're being blocked from leaving. And everybody remembers of that generation, the Nakba, like they realize that once they leave the north, they'll never return. The Israelis will occupy their land and they'll have even less, maybe not even to go. I think the problem with looking at it from that perspective is you have to realize that the Palestinians living in any of these surrounding countries, especially like places like Saudi Arabia and other places, they are stateless people. They are almost like if I was born in Alabama and my kids were born in Alabama, and because I'm not from Alabama, I'm never going to be given citizenship. I'll never have the rights of citizenship in those countries. And if I was a Palestinian, I wouldn't want to leave a place that I had some sort of like roots in, because even if they go somewhere else, they're not going to be treated as citizens or anything else other than refugees. They've been in some of the places that have been bombed in Gaza have been refugee camps for 50 years since the very beginning of the expulsions from Palestine.
The other thing, taking into consideration though, and again, somebody correct me if I'm wrong. I hate to like cite numbers and if they're not accurate, but I thought I heard something like 70% of the Palestinian people supported Hamas. Like that's a big fucking number. Like when you think about the United States, like our country is almost split right down the middle, like Democrat, Republican. But imagine if the country was 70% for one party. Like that's the overwhelming majority of the country. I mean,
it's a homogenous society. I mean, they're all Arab. They're all I would say to the T. They're almost all Shia Muslims. They have, roots in the area. I mean, some of the people are from other parts of like the West Bank and other places like that. But I mean, they're a homogenous society that have the same goals of survival. And it's almost akin to from like my Native American reservation that I've been to very many times. The people will vote for politicians or groups that they can rely on to give them free shit. And as long as they're getting these commodities and stuff like that, they don't care who they're voting in. They just have to survive.
Sounds like the Democrats.
But if 70% of the people want to wipe you off the face of the planet too, I mean, at what point do they say enough is enough? And to Brent's point, where they said that what we talked about on the last stream that I was on, is that hey, there's a pause there. It looks like they're trying to give civilians the opportunity to get out. And Logan, you said, well, that's because Hamas and the enemy is kind of keeping them there. I mean, at what point do they decide, hey, enough with letting the fucking their enemy dictate all the conditions? I mean, we gave you 3 weeks to try to get out, and Hamas wasn't the only one. There was other countries too that was stopping their borders to try to keep them in there to think, hey, they're not going to come in. But at what point do they say, look, we've given enough time. It's time to go in and do what we came here to do. And I'm not saying that it's a shitty way. It's a shitty thing. I mean, war is shitty, especially urban combat. But at what point if you guys that live in Texas, if the cartels and shit came over from Mexico in there and started attacking, and which they have done in the past in a large scale, and then we had to go in there and say, hey, we're going to go into Mexico, but we're going to give you some time. Hey, if you're in these cartel-held cities or towns and villas, get out. And if not, when does it become acceptable that, hey, we've given you enough time, now it's time to kick that ass?
Yeah, that's a good point, Will. If Mexico invaded Brownsville, Texas, and did what just happened in Israel, we'd be carpet bombing Mexico City right now. That's the B-52s would fly nonstop.
I'm not saying that that's some plan that we're making. I'm just trying to look.
I'm just saying that's literally what would happen if it was the opposite of like the Apache suddenly came off their reservation and did the same thing. About another 3 days, there wouldn't be any Apaches left. So in that respect, the Israelis are probably being a little more responsible than we would be. Because look at us, 2 buildings got knocked down, and we messed up 2 countries for 20 years, spent trillions of dollars, and are rather proud of ourselves.
I mean, I'm not picking sides, but Palestine, you're saying that earlier that, this Palestine, that's their area, that's where they're in, whether they're refugees or their home, and nobody wants to leave their home. I get that too. But other places throughout the world, I know it's hard to say, hey, just pick up and move. I mean, we hear that all the time, just pick up, move, leave, go somewhere else, like you said, and people don't want to do that too. But there's other places. I know I wouldn't want to leave my home, but I can tell you one thing: I would do everything in my power if I knew that the enemy was around, and let's say the military was come in to try to get the hell out. If I wasn't, on the side of the fighting.
I mean, we have to look at, like, we're talking about punitive expeditions to destroy Mexicans or something, right? But the problem is that we never have the intention of going in and taking Mexico. These people, the Zionists in Israel, want to. They were looking for any reason. And if you look for more than that, you can look at what happened several years ago. And maybe you can see it on the internet still, but if you just Google Palestinian oil and gas reserves discovered, there has been a significant amount of gas and oil reserves found offshore and inside Gaza that were held by Gaza, and nobody could secure it. The Israelis couldn't secure it. American companies and other oil companies and energy companies have been, licking their lips, waiting for something like this to happen. If you look up oil deals and gas reserve, I guess like discovery permits that have been issued in the last couple months, it makes sense why these people were allowed to go into southern Israel and wreak havoc. And I feel like the IDF doesn't want to go into Gaza. Like they're at a total disadvantage, and they don't have the manpower to fight a protracted long war. They don't have the manpower to occupy Gaza again and do anything worthwhile. They literally waited until the United States deployed their ground forces to do anything. They're so used to us fighting their wars for them and being their stormtroopers that they don't know how to fight their own wars anymore. And I feel like there's probably more to this conflict than we think, as far as just like hostages or whatever. But I wholly believe that the Hamas leadership is totally willing to sacrifice half of the Palestinians in Gaza to meet their goals. And I totally believe that the government in Israel is totally willing to sacrifice however many citizens it takes to get their way. And that is the problem that we see ourselves in, where the global leadership has to be there. Somebody has to be the negotiator, and we shouldn't let it be Russia or China.
100% agree with you on that, Logan. And it is suspicious all this happens right when we have some of our weakest leadership either. One of the things I've noticed through recent history is changes in administration is just how we get treated overseas. Like when our national leadership is weak, all of a sudden, as I ship goods overseas, all of a sudden customs problems arise, problems that didn't happen before. And then what do you know? Stronger leadership comes in, and all of a sudden, shipments don't get delayed anymore, and we don't have problems on a general scale anymore. And that's just at a low, minor level, and it increases exponentially to what you were talking about just happened to Blinken, which he totally deserved. I mean, that guy's been standing on the runway for hours. He should have been there 10 minutes tops because shit can happen. Turned the plane around and left.
Yeah, the dignity of our diplomats should never have been questioned, even if it was Anthony Blinken. But I mean, imagine being an Arab diplomat or an Arab leader. Like I think he went to also visit Mohammed bin Salman, and imagine the U.S. sending a dual citizen to speak on behalf of the United States as a negotiator between Israel and the Arab world. I think a lot of these things that the U.S. has done diplomatically in this conflict has not made that, like, they hadn't thought it through. Like, just think about it a little bit, and they could have come up with a different solution that may have been more sensitive. If you've ever, most of us have interacted with Arabs. They're a tribal people. They believe in saving face. They believe in they have a system of laws, but I mean, the tribalism of their roots really goes back to, like, vengeance is the ultimate law, you know. And they remember when somebody slights them. They remember when somebody has broken them or put them in a position where they betrayed them, and they have long memories. And the U.S. diplomatic service should be aware of these cultural issues, and they have not seemed to be.
True. But, you know, I once saw a joke at the beginning of Desert Shield, you know, mission of the United States Armed Forces, clear up State Department messes. It's been a thing all through history that the State Department makes lots of messes that have to be cleaned up later. You know, there's a lot of problems with the State Department. We could devote several shows to that. But unfortunately, we have the people we have, and we'll have to deal with the situation that we get. What we can only hope right now is as ineffective as our diplomatic initiatives are right now is that the big stick that is the U.S. military hopefully still carries enough threat to make people listen to the diplomats.
Yeah, and as far as like from what you said, the problem with that is that who has been the primary initiator of global intervention since Benghazi? It's been the State Department.
Yep.
And
There you go.
the State Department is not built to fight wars. I mean, the State Department is staffed by people who have degrees in international relations and international finance and other shit. And there are very few military people within its ranks other than its diplomatic security service. If you looked at Benghazi, I mean, you looked at the exact way that they tried to establish their own wars with trying to be like the CIA or something. I mean, they funding groups against each other, conducting semi-covert operations, trying to use their GSR guys as like freaking meat shields. I mean, we have to stop letting the State Department wage wars and dictate the initiative of military conflicts, because that's one of the major problems we've had in the last 10 years, I think. Especially like even when it comes to like Ukraine, they had the same problem. They tried to support Ukraine, but they didn't know how to do it. They Epic failed in 2014 and 2015 when Russia was invading and occupying territories, and they just don't. They really, I mean, they don't know what they're doing. And when you let the State Department take lead on stuff like that instead of the military, then you have problems.
Oh, absolutely. And the primary point that backs you up is the Balkan Wars, whereas the State Department tried to do many things, and the DoD, especially under Saakashvili, stood up to them big time and said, no, we're not doing that. Unfortunately, what happens is you get into the invasion of Iraq, and the State Department starts doing things, and the military goes, no, we're not doing that. They went, fine, we'll hire Blackwater to do it for us. So unfortunately, there has to be some type of legislation to rein in the State Department, because the military can only apply so many brakes, as we see now, because one of their big brakes is gone.
And like you said, like the U.S. naval forces, like as powerful as they are when I looked at the order of battle, like you said, just 20 years ago, carrier task group was about 8 to 9 ships. Now we're seeing carrier task groups with like 3 or 4. Yeah.
4 ships make a carrier battle group now.
Yeah. And it's, I mean, that's our big stick, really. I mean, our domination of the blue waters is the ultimate U.S. foreign policy. And as that gets weaker and weaker, we're going to see a lot more bullshit. Like you said, like people say, hey, why do we have bases everywhere in the world? Why do we have military presence everywhere in the world? Well, you should appreciate that, because our force projection, that's what enables our force projection. That's what enables you to fly to another country and not, get your ass beat by the border guards. That's what allows you to have free economic trade with other countries. If you didn't have this, you'd have guys raiding your boats and taking your stuff and taking people hostage. I mean, we have to have a active deterrent in our naval forces at all times. And from what I've seen with the China, there's a point I was going to bring up about the Chinese that were doing something recently. And I'll think of it.
What aren't they doing?
No, I think I know where Logan was going with this. The Chinese are flexing their naval muscles. They're learning what they can do. They're learning what they can get away with. They're learning how far they can push before they get a response. And the Chinese do have two naval advantages over us. One, their fleet is larger than ours. Now, ours is quantitatively better in every measurable way that counteracts that. But they also have fleet concentration. I mean, they just need to be right off their coast in the Western Pacific. Our Navy needs to be everywhere. And we're also not close to anywhere where things happens. So our fleet that's a lot smaller than theirs gets even exponentially smaller, because it's in transit, it's in maintenance. A certain amount of the fleet has to be in the Atlantic, not the Pacific. So the Chinese are learning, like, okay, how much can we make the Americans run? How many places can they actually be? What power can they project? And they're looking at ways to fill in that spots, like in Djibouti, right there. That's at the bottom of the Red Sea, controlling a very vital waterway. And one of the nations that has a bases in Djibouti, a lot of them do, but one of them does is China. Another place where China has port access rights is the Azores, which is Portuguese territory, a NATO nation. So they're learning and they're setting up their bases, even if they can't make effective uses of them. They're just seeing what they can get away with.
Hey, speaking of the PLAN, did you guys hear about they lost a submarine? In apparently a submarine trap of their own. Like, I guess that's the thing. They have these submarine traps underwater. At least this is all allegedly. Anyways, according to the article I read, but I don't know the details of this trap, but it's some sort of submarine trap, and they got caught in their own damn trap, and they lost a sub with all their sailors.
Well, think about that for a second. If you're China and you lose a submarine, is it better to lose it because you got caught in your own trap against the imperialist dogs, or have to admit to everybody your submarine is garbage?
Yeah, they're still running like post World War II diesel subs is like the majority part of their submarine fleet.
They are improving quickly, though, and they are opening new bases, so they're learning quickly. Now, part of that is the Chinese are incredibly good at copying things. So they're copying what they see. But as they're proving with their aircraft carriers, while they can copy, that doesn't give them knowledge on how to use. And they're having fleet problems. I mean, their fleet is massive, but I'd still say it's a highly ineffective fleet.
I think that's important to note, though. You know, if they have these submarine traps, like they know that subs are obviously going to be a big key component in an armed conflict with us. You know, you see the Australians acquiring submarines, so it's like there's no secret. Like subs are going to play a key role in the fact that the PLAN are in placing submarine traps in certain areas in the South China Sea or wherever. Like that's something to take in consideration.
Yeah, if you look at any of the war games, naval war games that have happened within the last 10 years between U.S. coalition force and the Chinese PLAN, you'll see that they lose every single time. But because they have so many submarines, they really cause a shitload of damage on U.S. naval forces. Like significant. I'm talking like 3 or 4 carriers being sunk. And if you look at the seas on like especially like the South China Sea and the Yellow Sea and areas like that, it's really shallow actually, like comparatively to like the rest of the Pacific or even the Atlantic. And if you look at the naval terrain, especially like the western coast of Korea, you see the tidal zones and how big they are. That's not really good U.S. sub territory. It's like patrol boat territory, like brown water Navy territory. And they've already assessed that if we put our missile cruisers in there, our subsurface fleet, you know, even if it's like guided missile, like Tomahawk carriers, like Ohio class, like the one that just came into the Mediterranean, they're going to be seen from satellite imagery or even from aircraft because they can't go deep enough. And so that's why you don't see a lot of the U.S. subsurface fleet in that area, because they just can't hide. They have to be significant amount of standoff distance within the eastern areas of Taiwan, even to be a little bit hidden. I still got to remember my Chinese point, but somebody in the chat brought something up that we are thinking logically and not emotionally about like the political situations and these conflicts, but there are people within these governments that do think logically, and they sometimes are removed. I want to bring up something that happened today. in the Ukraine conflict. Everybody's familiar with General Zaluzhny, the Hetman, the commander-in-chief of Ukrainian forces. He has been critical of the Zelensky regime and some of the other military and civilian leadership of the country for, especially during, it was like a Esquire or Time magazine article or something that he did a interview without permission, and he was talking shit. And today, his aide, his adjutant, was having a birthday party, and he was opening his birthday presents, and he got his freaking head blown off by an explosive. And this is like typical Eastern European intelligence assassination shit. But think about it, like you have these logical elements within your military or civilian leadership, and if they're not in line with the emotional narrative or what the plan is, they will kill you. Especially in these other countries, like everybody has this idea, like U.S. people, like other than like JFK or something like that, like there's no assassinations going on. But in other countries, like if you do the wrong thing, like if I was in an Eastern European country like Ukraine or something, and I didn't say who I was, there's a high possibility that I'll find myself, in a forest under the ground. I mean, these people don't fuck around. The Chinese don't fuck around. The Arabs, especially like the Saudi Arabians, you go into Saudi Arabia and you say something wrong, you'll find yourself, with concrete shoes in the Persian Gulf.
Well, I mean, we're not far, to be quite frank. I mean, we're not far from that. I just watched the news today, and President Trump was at fucking court today in a civil trial, and it's like, there's no question what they're doing, right? The timing on all these cases they brought against it, and like we've talked about this at length. Like Trump is not my guy. Like I will vote against him in the primary, but if he becomes the nominee for the Republican Party, I will vote for him. But with that said, like I'm watching all these court cases that are being brought against him from, far left prosecutors, and it's just absolutely ridiculous. And there's no question this is all for political, right? They're trying to censor him. They're trying to, and it's like, this is the United States of America. And so, I mean, this is banana republic shit. So it's like, how far off are we from that, Logan? I mean,
it's like you said, it's like legalized legal paperwork assassination. They're going after him with everything they can legally, like with every adjunct, anything. Like he tied his shoes wrong in 5th grade or something. Like it seems like. Is it right? No. Could it be much worse? Yes. And I just think that he's not going to be the nominee for other reasons. And he's pretty old, honestly. Like he's pretty old. Like, just like I was saying to somebody else today, like we have all these old dudes, like even like the Ukrainian conflict, we have all these old Soviet generals that have been reactivated and they're like leading the armies and stuff like that. And I mean, they have admitted that they did, fucked up shit, and they didn't, use, like we were talking about earlier, like mismanagement of human beings, like their soldiers. I was saying how I have one guy, he's like a volunteer, and he's like fought for years with no pay, and he's like a patriot and stuff like that. And they have him guarding air defense positions. And then the guys, they take other guys, like 56-year-old dudes, that have, no military experience, and they're literally like beating them with sticks into the trenches to fight the Russians, no motivation. And it's like, why, like how idiotic do you have to be? Like we need some new ideas. We need to get rid of these old dudes. Like we can't have this fucked up situation anymore.
I just watched a video today, and I might not have the backstory completely accurate, but it looked like a deserting Ukrainian coming up, and there was a couple English-speaking Ukrainian volunteers, and they murdered him. Like the freaking guy that was going UA, man, he fucking, they were like, hey, turn around, or what are you doing? And then freaking blasted him.
Yeah, I watched that video. They had the two guys that came up behind him, and they said something about like they weren't wearing IFF at all, and their equipment looked weird. Like it didn't look right to me.
So you
And
think they're Russians?
no, I think the whole video is fake.
Oh,
And this,
really?
that's not me saying this. I'm saying what like other people, like people have analyzed the video,
Yeah.
and they looked and seen this is kind of in response to there's quite a few videos of like Westerners like and other Ukrainian soft dudes like just like wrecking shit lately, and they want to like I think they want to kind of like take the wind out of that sail a little bit as far as
Oh, okay. So you think it's like a Russian disinformation campaign?
Yeah,
That makes sense.
yeah.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
I just watched something on YouTube today about it was on Simple History. It was talking about all like the shady stuff that's been done over the years, different militaries. You know, they were like talking about Mac VSOG, taking ammunition and stuff and putting duds in there for mortar rounds and AK and stuff.
Yeah,
It's just an example among many.
Yeah, best part of that book, if you ever read the book SOG, I think
Yeah.
by Major Plaster, like The Hidden Story or whatever, best part of that book is the very beginning when they have that operation that they took North Vietnamese prisoners and they sent them to this island where they had like created this like fake North Vietnamese resistance group. And then they allowed them to escape to go to their Soviet buddies in North Vietnam and say, oh, there's this giant North Vietnamese resistance movement that's happening. And they believed it for like decades. It's crazy.
One of the things, part of that whole operation, according to that video, was that it was meant to, create conflict between the North Vietnamese and the Chinese, who were supplying them with ammunition and weapons, because it was like, hey, they're creating all these rumors and incidences of weapons exploding with Chi-Com made equipment, and then it's like the North Vietnamese going to the Chi-Coms like, hey, your shit sucks, what the fuck, but it's all part of the disinformation campaign. We're at the little over an hour mark. I do want to kind of pivot back and kind of look internally in the United States and talk about this, okay? Because there's a lot of stuff going on, particularly with this Israel war, and we're seeing mass protests. We're seeing the left kind of turn on each other, which is very interesting to me. Muslim support for Joe Biden has, within like the Democratic Party, has like tanked, right? So it's like they're kind of scrambling there on that. You're kind of seeing like left versus left on that end. You're seeing on the right, you're seeing dudes that are kind of like going against the First Amendment, talking about locking people up for free speech. It's fucking kind of crazy. But we're also seeing a lot of anti-Semitism here in the United States, which is kind of mind-blowing to me. What are your guys' thoughts on all that?
I'll go last.
I'll jump on the grenade. That's tradition. Well, I'm not exactly torn up about the left tearing itself apart. But this was bound to happen. I mean, they've given a voice to people that have gone against the traditional stuff. The squad has always stood up for Hamas. It's not a new thing, and they have their following. And because the government's for Israel, there are people who will be for Palestine for no other reason than that. They don't understand what they're for. Like this whole thing about LGBTQ supporting Palestine is just blowing my mind, because literally they'd be killed instantly over there. That part just blows my mind. And it just shows you how, as Lennon said, people can be useful idiots. And you know what? Good on Hamas for taking advantage of it. They're there, use them. I did notice that with the riots at the White House last night, I don't think any of those people are going to suffer anything the J6 people are suffering, and nobody's even calling for it. Funny how that happens. And as far as the right wanting to restrict freedom of speech, the tyrant always wants to restrict freedom of speech, and it does not matter what side of the political spectrum they come from. And history is full of examples of that. Although people always claim fascists are right wings, Hitler was from the left and he restricted a lot of speech, and pick your South American, Central American dictator, they were generally on the right, and they were all about restricting free speech. So no surprise there.
The problem is that over the past couple of years, that the one side of the aisle has been given the small, minute, but a large voice to a lot of people out there. And like we said earlier, because there's no clear good guy, bad guy, it's kind of hard for them to pick a side. And there's a lot of infighting. I agree with Les what he said. The people that you haven't heard a lot about it, but the demonstrations or protests that are at the White House and in the Capitol and things of that nature getting out. They've gotten to a point now where they beat their chest when it came to the other side, and now they're just in a huge state of turmoil when they can't pick a side and pick something who they should back, and it's eating themselves up, which some people would say is a good thing or bad thing when it comes to individual rights, and people are getting on to freedom of speech and all that. That, you know, again, that's one of the things that makes this country great, that everybody has the ability to state their opinion, but one side hates it when it's not their belief.
It's just mind blowing to me. And I think we've brought this up before, but like, it's no secret there's a lot of liberals that are Jewish, right? And then you have these massive left-wing protests against Israel, and you got stuff like at these college campuses where it's like they have murals of like all the hostages are just getting torn down, you know. And I mean, did you guys see that one video where the people with the fucking carpets or shamags, wherever they were like blocking the one Jewish kid trying to walk to class, and they're like, shame, like fucking Game of Thrones. And it's like, what the hell is going on? Like, you know, I just can't believe. I mean, I can believe because we saw it during the Summer of Love type stuff. But it's just, it's crazy that, you know, there's not more outrage about stuff like that that's happening out in plain view.
I mean, it's pretty bad when Bernie Sanders can't even come out and say that the anti-Semitism is bad. It's heightened. It's been a lot more, right, because he's scared of pissing off other wings. And here, this is, you know, they're asking a Jewish man about it, and you could see him dodging the question and trying to not just say it's okay to say yes, it's a fucking problem. All right, we shouldn't be hateful to anybody. All right?
No, not on the left. Martin O'Malley proved that 10 years ago when BLM first rose after Ferguson, and they asked him if Black Lives Matter, and he goes, all lives matter. And his career was over instantly. Bernie's just being smart.
Yeah, I think all this kind of put to the test that the spectrum of politics is really, it's kind of duped us all, how we think about it. And really the horseshoe theory of political spectrum is really, you know, if you think about it, like the extremes are very close together from the right and the left. And as far as the reactions of our own government, it's been almost completely aligned, the far right and the far left, neocons and neolibs, and the far left communist organizations. And that's when we were talking about, like, I know people talk shit like about it in the comments, but like Jackson Hinkle and like other foreign subversive people like that, like they're trying to bring together like these two supposedly opposite spectrums of political theory into one, like MAGA communism shit. And like, it's, I mean, people are latching onto it because they're like, hey, you know, guys that work in factories, you know, that voted for Trump are very much like the proletariat of the teens Soviet Union, you know, or like pre-Soviet Imperial Russia. And like the average Joe, like, you know, they think about going home and getting a living wage and having benefits. It's like, and these are the same people that comment, you know, and say, we have our own problems at home. Yes, we do have our own problems at home, but everything affects us. Like we can't realistically be an isolationist nation, or even like some of these people are like fake isolationists, but the things that happen outside of the United States influence your pocket. You can't say hands off with the global community and what happens in the global community. we have to have some sort of influence there. We have to have some sort of power there, or else we're going to be the ones that are going to be making T-shirts, and putting together Nike shoes and not trying to jump off of the Apple factory roof. I mean, it blows my mind as far as like the way that people view these different sides of the political, I guess like you said, like the Squad and other people. And I mean, these people are falling over themselves, even like in the Republican Party. They're falling over each other trying to meet with Xi Jinping. Like they're, saying, oh, we get to meet with Xi Jinping before Biden does, like they're falling over each other trying to meet with foreign leaders that we're supposed to be, not having really a lot of respect for the way they treat us.
Gavin Newsom just went there.
Yep.
I thought a few years ago that was
gotta go kiss
goddamn
the ring.
cardinal sin, right? I thought that was a sin.
I mean, we're going to the king, so to speak. Like our own political leadership is like, presenting themselves in homage to foreign dignitaries, and offering, he's literally going there like Game of Thrones with like, a gift saying, I will let you build businesses in San Francisco. Like, I mean, it's not just a visit. He's offering the American economy and other things that you're not aware of to these foreign people. And it's really disgusting in my eyes. And those are the kind of things that we need to be like paying attention to. Like, I know we were trying to talk about like domestic things, but there's like so much in the world that's like influenced by international activities and the way our domestic politics has interactions with foreign states, even like non-state actors. I'm going to look at the comments more.
Well, I mean, it's just to be expected, right? Like I always laugh when I hear people talking about like China and Russia interfering with our elections. Like, of course they are. Like we're interfering with their shit too, as much as possible. Like I would expect my government to interfere with some third world shithole nation somewhere in the world that has, one side of the spectrum, a pro-American government and a anti-American government. Like, who are we trying to back? Let's try to get the pro-American government to freaking get in there. That way, if God forbid we have an armed conflict somewhere, we got an airfield we can construct in their shithole country. So, I mean, it's just the way of the world.
Yeah, and when we were talking about like the reappearance of anti-Semitism, if we can call it that, it's a historical cycle. And I mean, and as long as there's a rootless clique of a certain ethnic religious groups that install themselves as elite of a country and try to subjugate people are going to get pissed off about that. Historically, I mean, I don't want to say like there's like a natural anti-Semitism, but there's a historical evidence that they are their own worst enemy. And the reason that people get so to the point, like you saw in Dagestan a few days ago, when they saw that there was an Israeli flight landing in Dagestan, and they literally came out in their hundreds to try to like rip these people apart. It's because they have put themselves in a position, just like the U.S. or any other person, like puts themselves in a position of dominance over another person. And then if those people are mistreated, they're going to naturally tend to, retaliate. And the global community is already setting themselves against Israeli policy already, like before this conflict even happened. And now that they're seeing like, little girls being pulled out with, one arm and their heads crushed in. I mean, they're not supporting Hamas. They're just kids, There's tons of kids over there. There's old people. There's innocent people there that are being slaughtered. And if you say anything about it, you're put into one side or the other. There's no gray area anymore. It's all black and white. And I've seen articles that have come out of the Israeli media that have said, if we lose our country, where can we go? And there's been many people in the Jewish global community that have said everybody better start speaking Mandarin because China is the only country that we could probably go to now.
I think it's important to note that of all the surrounding Arab nations, like none of them want to take in Palestinians. And I think that's a very key thing. And, you know, you were mentioning earlier how like Egypt had secured its border there and they're not letting them come in, or at least not in, you know, massive waves. It's like nobody wants those people.
That's because they're trouble.
They're
Right.
trouble. They're
That's
trouble.
what-
And like you don't want, it's like you don't want a like homogenous group of military age people and their families to like just sit on your doorstep. You know what I mean? They're just going to cause trouble because the Egyptians, they could use the global community to like set up camps in the Sinai. Of course they could, but do they want the political chaos and the like influx of Shia? I mean, they're Shia. They're like a completely different sect of Islam with totally different ideas, totally different culture than other Arabs. And you don't want to take all those people in.
Oh yeah, and in 2014, I was at a conference in Abu Dhabi, and at dinner, I was sitting with a guy, some locals. One guy was an Australian, one guy was a Kuwaiti, and one guy was a Jordanian. And if you haven't been to the Emirates and stuff, one of the things you realize is that any menial work's done by a Pakistani, a Sri Lankan, or an Indian, and anything in leadership's done by a Westerner. And the Australian guy was one of the Westerners in charge, and he was telling that he'd got his woes about getting a new batch of Sri Lankans in and them not really speaking the language very well, and it was causing problems. And I made the comment, I said, well, why don't you guys just bring the Palestinians in? They need work, and they speak the language. And the Kuwaiti and the Jordanian immediately spoke. I'm like, no, that's a horrible idea. Nothing good comes out of that.
No, they have a significant number already.
Yeah, and they know their problems. And, you know, I wouldn't have to be surprised if a lot of the Arab nations are like, you know what, we'll let the Israelis mow the lawn for a little while before we really get uppity about this. Because you have to look, if you go from 1948 and you're an Arab nation, you've fought 4 wars for these people. And it hasn't been good for you any of those 4 times. So as MBS said, you know, the Palestinians are going to have to learn to deal with the situation.
Yeah, and MBS is too busy dealing with the Yemenis and other people. He's not gonna want a bunch of Shias coming into his country. You know, there's enough stateless people in Saudi Arabia already. They don't want any more.
Exactly. Their problems for him. The Egyptians have known for a long time. That's why they're keeping an ironclad door on that border and stuff. You know, the Jordanians in the 70s had to like use their whole army to throw the PLO out and stuff. So there's no place for them to go because everywhere they've gone, they've caused problems. And I imagine there's the Israeli government looking back at history going, you know, occupying that place is a royal pain in the ass, but we have a lot less problems when we're there than compared to when we're not.
What else we got?
What'd I do? Drop the mic or something?
Yeah.
Yeah, as far as like domestic issues from this, like, I think we can see, as somebody in the chat put, that our political leadership is not logical in dealing with these situations. And we can't, like I said before, we can't think of it as like a monolithic conspiracy where everybody's like moving in the same direction. They all have this conspiracy of, you know, biolabs or whatever else people say undisclosed chat. But it's really just, there's emotional people within our political spectrum that will take any advantage politically to help themselves, enrich themselves, and help their group, you know, have status just in DC. They don't care about it outside of DC. And there's other people that want to make money. There's the military industries that would love to see more countries fight each other in the world. There's, you know, people within the evangelical Zionist lobby like Nikki Haley, they would love to just do whatever Israel says and quote Bible scripture and say we got to bring about the end of the world. I mean, it sounds crazy, but I mean these people really think about it like that, and that's why they want to support like some sort of weird Armageddon shit happening in the world. I mean, that's literally their goal. It's not because they care so much about Israel. It's just they want, biblical prophecy to happen. And there's those people too. I mean, and then there's people that just don't like Palestinians. They don't like Arabs. There's people that don't like Jewish people. And all these people together are the kind of people that we have to deal with as far as what policies we give ourselves to in this situation. I am only interested in U.S. interests. That's it.
I'm in the same boat, man. I only want what's best for the United States. All I can say in terms of the Israeli, Palestinian conflict that's going on, like there's still like 200 something fucking hostages, and some of those are Americans. A significant portion of them are Americans, and until those hostages come back or return, like I don't give a shit about the Palestinian cause. That, I mean, I'm sorry if that offends some people, but like until you fucking return those hostages, a significant portion of them are Americans. Like I don't want to hear you crying. Like it is what it is. I mean, I understand what people are saying, but at the same time, like Israelis gave notice to the northern part of Gaza, right? You have X amount of time to get the fuck out, give us our hostages back, and hey, you didn't get out. Hey, we're going. So until hostages are returned, I don't think there should be a ceasefire. It isn't about, in my eyes, it isn't about, minimizing civilian casualties in the north. Like they gave them ample warning, and they have their people are being held hostage right now in tunnels. God forbid, God knows what's happened to those people. If they're even still alive, I don't know. But until those people are returned, like Palestinians hold no moral high ground in my eyes.
Yeah, and you're echoing exactly
Agreed.
what the draft proposals of the UN Security Council countries and what our own State Department and what the Arab League has said. Exactly that. They said release the hostages and that we can have a humanitarian pause. Guess what was said? No. And even when Netanyahu was given, I think it was 2 days ago, he was given the option. He said that the Hamas is willing to release the hostages if you agree to a ceasefire or some sort of humanitarian pause with no conditions. And he said, not no, but fuck no. And that's why I said Anthony Blinken had nothing in his hands when he went to these other countries and was saying, hey, can we have something? I mean, negotiations have to happen. And it's clear that Israel doesn't care if there's U.S. citizens held hostage. They don't care. They're willing to sacrifice.
That's because they attacked his people. And I mean, I agree with Brent too. I want our people back, but I'm also not naive to say, hey, look, bitches, if you don't give us our fucking hostages back by Friday, we're coming in to get our hostages, which then turns it into a big fucking shitstorm, which, that may be they're trying to get their end game and then everybody can get over there and then it's a big fucking big conflict too. But to his point, it goes back to if it had happened here in our neck of the woods and there was 100 damn Israelis that were taken by, and I only use the cartels because it's southern, but if they had came in and killed freaking thousands of our people, we'd be saying the same shit too. I don't give a fuck what Israel wants to do right now. We're gonna go in and we're gonna fucking kick that ass. But for us, I think too, you got our people. We gave it. They tried to get them back, and I understand that was part of the negotiations, and it does suck. But until we get this has been a hostage situation before, back in the early, in my real young days in the 80s and too. I think that's what the other side is trying to do. Look, eventually we know there's going to come a time where the Americans say, we're going to go get our people. And then that's when, the big shit storms happens.
But you have to think about it. Like, and when Joe Biden came out and he said, oh, the hostages are taken and blah, blah, blah. The Hamas released 3 American prisoners as like a sign of, hey, we're willing to negotiate. And I mean, it was only 3 out of 200 something, but still, there should have been, that was like an opportunity for there to be like an open negotiation. So that like,
And there was a little bit of, there was still time before that they had went in. It wasn't like they just gave those 3 and then Israelis went in there and just started fucking blowing shit up. There was still some time. So 3 is great. Those 3 people that made it back, God bless them. I know their families are great and all, but there's still, as you said, 200 and some other ones over there.
But that was an opportunity for the 2 sides to be like, hey, okay, maybe we can start talking. But that didn't happen. And Will, you have the premier hostage rescue operational force in country, CAG. They've been there. Have they gotten any hostages back? No, because it's complicated. Because these people aren't just U.S. citizens; they're Israeli citizens too. They're not just U.S. people on a vacation. And at what point do you start to think, hey Les, you're the general task force of CJ Soda of Gaza, okay? You have to put a Delta Force squadron on the ground to rescue hostages. You're a logistics guy. What does the logistical tail start to look like with mission creep of a Delta Force squadron? You got to have a Ranger company,
Massive.
at least a Ranger company, and maybe 82nd or something. You have to have a logistics
and an aviation regiment
Aviation.
and a fighter squadron, carrier battle group.
And it starts looking like this, right? And that's why it hasn't happened. They've learned the lesson from Somalia. They've learned the lesson from Operation Eagle Claw. They can't do it by themselves. You just can't. I mean, guys in Task Force Green and other guys like that are badass, but there's just some stuff that they shouldn't do. And we've lost quite a bit of our SMU dudes because of things like this. And I mean, that's their job, but I mean, they've been placed into positions where maybe they shouldn't have gone in and got those people out. It wasn't worth the lives of our best American soldiers. That's just my opinion, though.
I just don't think you're going to get the support of the whole populace of America. As long as there's things that say there's American hostages anywhere, that is a big thing over here. I mean, people, like you said, think with their feelings and all, and when the American people hear that, whether they're dual citizens or not, they're not saying that. They're just saying that, hey, this group of individuals is holding 200 freaking Americans. What say the populace? And a lot of the populace is saying, hey, why aren't we going over there and getting that ass? Now, that's why Will is not in the position to start sending troops over, whatever. But, again, it's a shitty, complicated freaking thing.
And it's like, how do you get those people? Well, think about it realistically. Like, how are you going to get those people out?
I agree. We don't know. They're not in a
Yeah.
freaking football stadium, and you get to go over there and just take them from the football stadium. We know that they're not in a freaking hotel somewhere. They're scattered all over. They're probably underground. They're in bunkers. They're in all over. So I'm just saying logistically and thinking rationally, how would we do it? Again, it's
The way to do it is through negotiation. I mean, realistically, that is the way to do it. And there's been opportunity for that, and it's been an epic fail.
How long do we negotiate?
I mean, look, the dignity of the U.S. government and the U.S. people is at stake for all of this. That's why you can't say it has nothing to do with us, blah, blah, blah. That matters. And can we send in guys to like take out a few hostages or something like that? Maybe. Can we get all of them out? Probably not. And do we really want to go that route? Do we feel like that is like the best option?
If you don't stop it, though, it just fucking keep continuing like it has over there in that neck of the woods too.
But Hamas has there's no advantage for them giving up their hostages. If you think about it, there's absolutely no advantage.
And that's the problem, because they've done it so long that they've got away with it. Nobody's punched them in the fucking mouth, for saying. And I'm not out there warmongering. I'm just saying, and that's just Will McCann's freaking own opinion. I get it's complicated. I mean, I'd like for there to be no hostages. I like the dudes not hang gliding over into concerts and shooting people up. And I wish they all could get along. And I wish that 70 some years ago that, Israel and the Jews that were genocide and all during World War II, and the hatred that's been going on for 2,000 years, and this side hating this side because of this God and that God. I wish it wasn't like that. I'm not naive. People ain't all going to get along, and it's complicated and it sucks. And it does seem like it's a lot of freaking fighting going on now. We do have to pick a side. Whose side do we pick? I don't know. You said earlier, well, we can't just pick our own side. People hear America first and they think, oh, MAGA and all this. No, I'll do anything for the country. Almost anything. I love my country, and I'm sure those people love their country too. And that's the big problem, is how does everybody just get along? And we've never figured it out. And we may never figure it out.
And they're not going to. And like Les said one time, I can't remember, like a long time ago, he said something about, like, if there's a multipolar world, like the Cold War, it's going to create chaos. And that's why, like, the unipolar control, like, of the single superpower United States was such a good time for, like, the people, like, in general of the world, because there wasn't, all these militias running around. There wasn't all these, like, crazy, chaotic non-state actors, like, taking over whole fucking countries. None of that shit was happening, really. And now that you have, like, a multipolar global power factors, you're going to see more and more of this shit. As the U.S. loses its dignity and loses its influence in the world, you're going to see more and more and more. And yes, war sucks in general for, like, the people, like, when people are saying, oh, kick their ass, kick the Palestinians' ass. They've killed 4,000 children, dude. 4,000. I think that's significant, retribution for whatever happened.
The four of us in here are not naive. I'm not, like Brent said too, we're not going to say this many on this side, this many on that side, because it's always who's reporting and what numbers are getting reported. Somebody said in the chat that even though it's going by at like freaking Mach 12 and it's hard to keep up, is what does a regular average Joe do here to keep things like that? Hey, freaking do what you got to do to protect your family. So if any of that shit, as Brent loves to say, freaking Chi-Com paratroopers are coming in while you guys are their kids are at school and all, to be able to protect your family and train. I think that's a big thing to do around here. Just trying to change it up.
No, good point, Will. I mean, the outcome in Israel on October 7th would have been a lot different had those people been more prepared. Now, a lot of lack of preparations due to the laws they have over there. But even still, Hamas would have had a lot of time. Nobody would have got drug out of their bomb bunker if the people had a chance to defend themselves. I mean, those videos of people taking cell phone video of Hamas running through the streets while they're cowering in the upstairs bedroom is just horrifying. And I can only imagine what was going through their minds as they were making those videos. Of course, why would you make a video in such a situation anyways?
It's hard to hold a cell phone, though, if you got your rifle in your hand, too. So
exactly.
I mean, just the point of, nobody's coming. I mean, we saw that in Uvalde with a single shooter. Imagine 1,000 of those. And you really can't rely on your security being outsourced in any sort of way. And that includes, like, food security and other stuff like that, water security. You can't always rely on the government for that stuff.
And the irony of this is the whole setup of how kibbutzniks were organized in the 40s and 50s were to prevent just this kind of thing from occurring. Kind of interesting.
Well, I'm not. So, I mean, this last mass shooting that took place, that was in Maine, right?
Yeah.
And if I'm not mistaken, it's permitless carry there. They have constitutional carry. And, nobody challenged that shooter that I'm aware of.
I mean, the locals went after him and put 2 bullets in his head. But like you said, like, people were waiting for the cops.
Yeah.
They've been put into this position for the past 5 years of, if you take up arms as a prepared citizen, you're going to get your shit pushed in.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's
Look at
Yeah.
what's the young kid's name that like freaking shot 3 freaking dudes?
Rittenhouse. Yeah.
House. I mean, people see that kind of stuff and they're like, maybe I shouldn't do it in public. Maybe I shouldn't stand up to this, and then they hesitate and die. But I mean, if you can think of it, like that was like one petroleum specialist that like went to like an NRA course once, and you can see what kind of like shit they can cause. Think if it was like, I mean, if things get bad enough, I'm not really worried about Chinese paratroopers as much as I'm worried about a group of disaffected Americans that are acting at the behest of a foreign intelligence service and trained and equipped by this foreign intelligence service is then unleashed at their behest on the U.S. people for the gain of this foreign government. That's what I'm afraid of. I mean, I feel like that's worse than paratroopers falling from the skies.
Oh yeah.
Hard to argue that point, Logan.
Let's see.
What else we got?
I think somebody was bringing up the EU, how the EU is responding to stuff and how they're failing.
Don't forget tomorrow's election day. A lot of areas.
True. Of course, I love the EU, man, because it's the only government body out there that makes our Congress actually look organized and squared away.
Yeah, I was looking at I remember the euro being like almost 3/4 more than $1. And I just looked yesterday and it's like almost exact, like $1 almost.
Yeah, but this is normal. This is since the euros come out 20 years ago, these fluctuations are normal. Most of the time, the euro and the dollar are pretty close together.
As far as the meetings they've had, the European committees, what do you think about the like Slovakia came out last week and said that they're no longer, this is the new government that is formed in Slovakia, said that they're no longer supporting Ukraine militarily, like with military equipment, like complete stop. And then
Also, they didn't have that much to support with.
all their MiGs all the MiGs that they gave Ukraine have been shot down in the past month.
Oh, they're really?
The MiGs they gave are gone. The T-55s have been used up. And from what I can tell, since this war started, while all these European nations have given up various forms of military aid to the Ukrainians, nothing's backfilled it. I know it definitely hasn't happened in Germany. That's one of the big scandals over there. They pledged $100 billion above their normal defense budget, and they literally haven't spent the money.
Yeah, we're the new Leopard tanks. I mean, I think they're, from what you've seen too, like I thought the Leopard 2 was freaking awesome, but it's showing not that great. Like maybe it's like its kill ratio is like 4-1, but it's not the invincible machine that everybody thought it was going to be over there. And
I think that speaks more to the quality of Ukrainian tank crews than the tank itself.
yeah, maybe. Yeah, it's possibly, yeah. And as far as like their air assets, like all the Russians had to do in the past month was put up a Russian AWACS over, occupied territory outside of air defense zones. And they can see every aircraft that takes off from Poland to Lake Baikal. And they just shoot off their S-400s and then AWACS just guides it in. That's why they lost so many aircraft. Sucks, but they're never going to fill those planes at the F-16s. I mean, there's supposedly some guys here in Arizona. I live right by the base where they train the guys, and F-16 is a great platform. Viper is freaking awesome ground attack platform, but it's not going to dominate the skies over there. Just being honest, not with all those S-400s.
No, the Ukrainian Air Force, when the start of the war came around, was a bit of a joke. They hadn't modernized. Now they had learned to start fighting, and that shows in the fact that the Ukrainian Air Force still exists to this day. That doesn't speak well for the Russian Air Force. And the only way they're ever going to get built up is a massive aid program. Probably have to send the modern day equivalent of an American volunteer group, just like in World War II Flying Tigers. I think that's the only way you could get parity in the air.
I agree. And I think I saw something about that. Like like maybe a few months after the war started. I think that was actually put out by the presidential office that they wanted to do that.
Oh, I was an advocate of that right from the get-go.
Yeah.
Because there's an easy way to do it. There's two companies out west that provide aggressor services to the Air Force. One's called Draken International. The other one's called Air Combat Maneuvering. They fly French Mirage F1s that have all been upgraded to nearly fourth generation status. And the two groups together would equal about 90 aircraft. That would immediately change the balance of power over there.
Dude,
Just because,
what a cool job.
well, not only that, but I mean, you have the guys training our guys. You'd literally be sending squadrons of Top Guns over there. You know, it would immediately change everything. Although I'm pretty sure if we send a trained tank crew with every M1 we send over there, that'd make a hell of a difference too.
Oh, I'm sure. Yeah, that's a good. I didn't even think about it until you said that. Like flying Tigers on the ground, and as far as like, because there's like a significant cruise missile strike by the Ukrainians on Crimea and the Kerch Bridge structure, let's call it that. And they're like, yeah, we used all these scalps and shit. And I love seeing those videos of the Russians going Storm Shadow, and the shit getting there blown up or whatever. But I mean, they don't produce that stuff anymore. Like Storm Shadow and Scalp and stuff like that. Like it's not produced. Like every time they shoot something, even if it's like a 155 from 777, they're not replacing
It's
it.
irreplaceable.
Yeah.
Yep.
So I don't think that that's being taken into account as far as like the longevity of like how long the Ukrainians can actually continue at this rate of attritional warfare. That they can,
and then just because the typical Soviet hoarding of keeping old equipment around and stuff, like you were mentioning, the crates of DPs that had been unissued coming out. And I bet you in Russia, like I've been seeing news reports about all the T-55s being pulled out. I guarantee you Russia's got more T-55s than we have Leopards that can be sent there.
Oh, definitely. Definitely.
Well, I mean, even a T-55, man, you put that sucker in, a defensive position, build up the defense around it. Like that's one hell of a fucking bunker, and couple that with, hundreds and hundreds of yards of mines in front of it and, obstacles. I mean,
there's the Irish guy. He's like American, but he used to be Irish. He's the Chieftain. He's on YouTube, and he brought something up like at the very beginning of the war.
Mm-hmm.
He said that it doesn't matter if you have a T-34 on the front line, it's still better than a squad, like a whole battalion of infantry sometimes. Like even if it's a piece of shit tank, it still has a significant weapon systems to bear. Even if it gets knocked out, I mean, you're still a well-protected vehicle with massive firepower.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
All right, guys.
I've told the story on here a bunch of times, but early Desert Shield and stuff, I was very impressed with T-55s when all I had was an M16.
Hey, we got a little over 10 mics till 2-hour mark, so let's start wrapping this up. I'm just gonna go around a horn. Start with Les. Final thoughts. Pimp your channel. Pimp anything you got coming down the pipe, and we'll call it quits for tonight. So, unless you got the con.
All right. Well, on my channel this Friday, I got a video coming out about a cool rifle I discovered over in Finland called the KAR-21. This thing is super cool. It actually does everything that the FN SCAR and the Bushmaster ACR claimed it could do. It is caliber convertible between 308 and 223 with changing only 4 parts, and it actually works. It's really freaking cool, and hope you all check that video out. For other stuff on my channel, in about a week or two, I'll be going to CQB Brutality out in Utah, and I'll be putting up video coverage of that match as well.
We know what time that is. It's the best holiday of the year is coming up, guys. There's 2 holidays this week. Of course, the Marine Corps birthday is coming up, and of course, Veterans Day. Hey, Good talk today. A lot of stuff going on. Unfortunately, we wish we'd come on here and do more talking about gear and things of that nature, but you got stuff going on in the world, and it's important to talk about. It's definitely been lively over there in the comments. Can't keep up with it. Just remember, everybody, that's what makes this country great is that we can come on here and we can have people with different points of view talking. And once again, hoorah, Semper all my brothers out there, and happy Veterans Day to everybody else this weekend.
Hey, thanks for having me on again, guys. It was great. I don't have any wisdom to put out. I don't have a channel yet, like YouTube channel or anything. I like contributing on here with Brent for now. And I'm on Instagram, Ghost of Shishimi. Sometimes I put stuff on there, Ukraine or military, geopolitical related stuff. Or you can just see what I'm posting, what shit I'm talking. I'm looking forward to seeing more people in the comments asking questions. It's going to be interesting next couple of months. My training schedule is pretty packed myself. I'm going through several courses at the same time concurrently. But one thing I can recommend if you're in Arizona, GPS sniper school, great group of guys out there, especially Coach Juan. He's really great, and they can take you from zero to hero, literally, 1,300 meters on your day one shot. A great place. If you guys have any questions, hit me up on Instagram. I usually answer my DMs.
All right, guys, Will beat me to it. That was going to be my big star performance there. 248 years, United States Marine Corps birthday coming up November 10th.
Hoorah!
So Marine Corps balls going to be held across the country. I know some people were asking about, a ball being canceled. Hey, every individual unit in the United States Marine Corps has its own ball, right? So one unit canceling their ball for operational reasons does not mean that balls across the United States Marine Corps are canceled. That is quite completely the opposite. So if you live in large metropolitan areas, you might see some Marines dressed blues. Be sure to welcome them and tell them happy birthday. So that's pretty much all I got, guys. I enjoyed the conversation. I appreciate all my warfighter buddies coming on tonight and kicking around the current events. It's always a good time, and I always appreciate them coming on. So anybody have any saved rounds? No?
Don't stop training.
Get out there and vote tomorrow if you're in the Commonwealth.
Awesome. All right, guys. Have a good night. Happy birthday, Marines. All right.
You're up.
Hoorah!